This week on Vaticano, we'll take a trip through the marvels of sacred music thanks to the 17th edition of the International Sacred Music and Art Festival, celebrated in Rome, and this year dedicated to St. Paul VI. After the last session of the Second Vatican Council, Pope Paul VI sent 8 messages out to the world, one of which was addressed to artists, encouraging them in their mission with the words, "Remember that you are the guardians of beauty in the world." And it was precisely St. Paul VI, only just canonized on the 14th of October this year, to whom the Pro Musica e Arte Sacra Foundation dedicated its 17th edition of the International Sacred Music and Art Festival, celebrated at the beginning of November in Rome. As St. Paul VI had reminded, humanity is in need of beauty and truth, so as not to fall into desperation and to be able to achieve happiness. And that's precisely the mission of Hans Albert Kurzial, founder and president of the non-profit Pro Musica e Arte Sacra Foundation, to safeguard beauty and place it within reach of all, through numerous initiatives under the motto, Art Saves Art.
With the theme, Art Saves Art, we were able to give our benefactors the opportunity to save sacred art through the art of music. This is our mission. In this basilica, we have done many restorations with our foundation. We have restored the organ of Luca Plazzi. We have done the altar of the Blessed Sacrament, the column chapel, both of the organs of Moratini. We have done many things in this basilica, and this always thanks to the support of our benefactors.
E questo sempre con il sostegno dei nostri benefattori.
But Professor Kurzial not only shares the mission of bringing beauty to every man with St. Paul VI, the very same now canonized pontiff is at the very origins of the Pro Musica e Arte Sacra Foundation.
This Pope changed my life. When I met Paul VI for the first time at the age of 20, I felt an enormous fire in my heart, and I said to myself, my German compatriots must feel the same way that I felt, and I did everything possible to organize pilgrimages and initiatives to come here to Rome. Today, after 50 years, I can say that we have brought more than 1.5 million Germans here in Rome alone, and this is all thanks to St. Paul VI.
Questo tutto fatto dal Santo Paolo VI.
Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum.
As this year's honoree, St. Paul VI mark was imprinted on this year's edition, inspiring each of its 6 concerts. In his letter to artists, St. Paul VI said that in beauty, man discovers that precious fruit which resists the wear and tear of time, which unites generations and makes them share things in admiration. Working for the unity of Christians through ecumenical dialogue has been an important part of the mission of the Sacred Music and Art Foundation since its creation in 2002.
Through music, I put Protestant choirs together with Catholic choirs. We make trips to Rome. We sing in the Sistine Chapel. In short, we do many things. We did this with the Protestants, with the Anglicans, and also with the Russian Orthodox. We were in Moscow, and now they are here.
This year, the State Chapel Choir of St. Petersburg, Russia was tapped to personify the ecumenical aspect of the festival. The performance took place in the Papal Basilica of St. Mary Major. The concert's program presented two very different parts. The first dedicated to Western choral classics like Palestrina, Verdi, and others, and the second composed of works of the sacred music tradition of the Russian Orthodox Church.
It's not just a pleasure for us to participate in a festival in this city, but a great honor. Culture is that means which allows us to understand each other, and we very much hope that our presence will explain a little bit what Russia is and who Russian people are. The semantic content of Russian and Catholic spiritual music is the same. Of course, the most important thing is that we are representatives of the Christian world, and this, of course, connects us. The purpose of the musical art, especially the singing culture all over the world, is to convey the meaning and content of not only words but also feelings to the heart of the listeners.
For Vladimir Chernyshenko, to be a part of the festival was a great opportunity to raise awareness to the St. Petersburg Chapel Choir, one of the most important in all of Russia.
The St. Petersburg Capella is the first professional music ensemble in Russia, whose history goes back to the formation of Russian statehood, and in August of next year, the Capella will celebrate its 540th anniversary. The chapel choir owns the main merit of the return of spiritual music to concert life of Russia, which for a long time, of about half a century, was banned due to the communist ideology.
In a few moments, we'll be back with more on Vaticano. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano. On the 7th of May 1964, Pope Paul VI met with a group of artists in the Sistine Chapel, the maximum expression of beauty. There, the pontiff established a new and true alliance with them. During his address, the Pope recognized that the friendship between the Church and artists had deteriorated and both sides were at fault. Before the stunned looks of those present, Paul VI took responsibility for it, admitting that for decades the Church had suffocated the creativity of many artists, asking them to be imitators and not creators of their own works. Following this line of constant search for stylistic responses, the Sacred Music and Art Festival proposed a composer with a restless heart in its 17th edition, Gustav Mahler. With his Fourth Symphony, he invites us to reflect on death and infancy, and he does so without abandoning his dramatically ironic and ambiguous style. The scene selected for the occasion was the Papal Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls, dedicated to the Apostle of the Gentiles. This basilica is the perfect architectonic combination of stylistic tendencies that, together with its imposing majesty, reflect in some way the work of the Austrian composer.
Mahler was a big personality of this time. He wanted to make his own very personal music, but also to make sure that the people understand it. That's why there was maybe double or triple suggestions of something, phrases and different styles, the mix of these styles, to make sure that every people has their own understanding of this composition, and to have also the world in every of these symphony.
The chamber orchestra, tasked with giving life to Mahler's Fourth Symphony, was made up of members of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. Albina Danilova, concertmaster and first violin, explained to us the stylistic aspects that make of this work an extraordinary creation within the symphonic work of Gustav Mahler.
I think the Fourth Symphony is very different than the other symphonies of him, because it's a chamber music version of what Gustav Mahler wanted to say to the world, or to every person of this world, or to Vienna lifestyle at that moment, at that point. So he tried to interpret his own ideas in a chamber music version for a whole orchestra. Today we play really a chamber version of this symphony, only for 14 people, and that was created of one of the composers of that time, because I think they have no money to play with whole orchestra, all of his symphonies.
From the stylistic point of view, Mahler proposes two revolutionary ideas during the second and fourth movements of the Fourth Symphony. In the second movement, Mahler speaks to us about death, and for it, he decides to tune the solo violin a full tone above the rest of the orchestra.
There is also a suggestion because he didn't like the concertmaster at that point, that orchestra. That's why he composed this piece, because it really sounds not well. It shouldn't be well, it shouldn't be sound well. Is the idea of death, but that with a clown face, like a smiling death. Very typical Mahler.
We find the second revolutionary idea in the fourth movement, where the composer describes life after death to us through the innocent gaze of a child. And for this, he turns to popular German music.
Final movement is with a small song from the Knaben Wunderhorn, from his cycles of songs. And this is maybe this children idea of paradise. Yeah, and in the first and second movement is maybe the life and its problems here on the earth. So he tried to make this contrast together, the earth life, and then like finally this paradise, but like a child vision of the paradise. Folk song is very naive. I think that's his vision. He wanted maybe to make the light of this paradise like unrealistic, not logical.
We'll be back after a short break with more on Vaticano. Welcome back. This is Vaticano. During his entire pontificate, St. Paul VI was a lover and promoter of art and beauty, insisting that Christian doctrine must always wear a mantle of beauty. During a speech to the professors and students of the Musical Conservatory of Milan in March of 1965, Paul VI remembered the importance of music as the most immaterial and arcane expression of art, capable of carrying the soul of man to the limits of the most elevated spiritual experiences. A tangible example of the transcendental character of sacred music is the Requiem of Mozart, protagonist of one of the 6 concerts of the 17th edition of the Festival of Sacred Art and Music. The Papal Basilica of St. John Lateran, Cathedral of the city of Rome, was the selected scene of this musical performance.
Europe, sometimes I have the feeling, is a little bit old and already exhausted. But this music, when you go to China, when you go also to Russia, I have to say, and to other countries like Mexico, especially the young persons love to hear that. And they still understand the importance, while I have the feeling we have too many other ideas, and what can I say? The marketing is a big part of our conscience, but actually the real important things sometimes are neglected. Music can do much more. Music can, of course, be a bridge between Chinese and Russians and people from Africa and Germans, because music is the language, of course, of many other things also, but also of emotions. And every human being has emotions, like being happy or sad or departing or arriving. And so you see, this is the wonderful thing. And beside that, music is also a bridge to God. This is the most important. I think at least what we can feel is in this music that we are somehow close to God. And this is already very, very much.
The Requiem was the last of Mozart's works before he died. For Justus Frantz, the director of the Philharmonia of the Nations, this work envelops all of the genius and the spirituality of its composer.
So in this Requiem, we find so much of Mozart, the depth, and at the end he was lonely, you know, he was alone. He was completely alone. His wife and the children, they were not with him, and he was somehow alone with God and saying goodbye to the whole world.
La Lacrimosa was precisely the last part that he composed before he died. The rest of the Requiem was finished by his student, Franz Xavier Süssmayr.
The Lacrimosa and the weeping, you know, this is the saddest point. And actually, we think that's the last thing Mozart has more or less, he has given all to his pupil Süssmayr, and so we can say this is only Mozart. Though we must consider today that Süssmayr was a little bit in vain, and he wanted to show that he's also a good composer, but actually Mozart has given him a lot. millions of wonderful moments, but in this Lacrimosa is something incredible, beautiful, and out of this world. While I'm conducting, the same feeling like when I'm playing the piano or the organ, you know, you are part of it. And I don't feel that I'm here somehow doing something with my baton. I feel that I'm in the middle of a creative process, and music starts to respond to me, and I can somehow change some sounds into the better, I hope. And I can, all these phrases, I can formulate like we are talking to each other now.
Art and transcendence have an appointment every year in the Eternal City, thanks to the work of the Pro Musica e Arte Sacra Foundation and the unconditional support of its benefactors.